Dear viewers, welcome to my Chanel Biography Zone, to this special journey through the life of one of the most inspiring minds of the 20th century, Carl Sagan. Today, we're not just talking about an astronomer, or a writer, or a TV presenter. We are diving deep into the extraordinary story of a man who made billions of people look up at the night sky with wonder, curiosity, and humility. Carl Sagan was more than a scientist. He was a dreamer, a poet of the cosmos, and a bridge between complex science and everyday people. His voice carried across television screens and book pages, reminding humanity of its small but precious place in the vast universe. He gave us unforgettable ideas like the pale blue dot, which continues to move hearts around the world. In this long documentary-style biodata, we will explore Carl Sagan's entire life story, from his childhood curiosities to his groundbreaking work with NASA, his best-selling books, his world-famous series Cosmos, his philosophies, and his legacy that still shapes our understanding of the universe today. So, sit back, relax, and let us travel through space and time together, following the path of a man who made science feel like poetry. Early life. Childhood.
Carl Edward Sagan was born on November 9, 1934, in Brooklyn, New York City. His family was modest, middle class, and deeply supportive of his curiosity. His father, Samuel Sagan, worked as a garment cutter in the city's clothing industry, while his mother, Rachel Molly Gruber, was a homemaker. Though they were not scientists, they encouraged Carl's questions and gave him the freedom to dream big. From an early age, Carl was fascinated by the mysteries of the universe. Growing up in Brooklyn during the 1930s and 40s, he often visited the New York Public Library and the American Museum of Natural History. There, young Carl stood in awe under the giant displays of planets and stars. These visits planted seeds of wonder that would later bloom into his lifelong passion for astronomy. At the age of 5, his mother took him to the 1939 New York World's Fair. The fair was filled with futuristic visions, including exhibits of rockets, science, and technology. It was here that little Carl first encountered the idea that humanity could travel beyond Earth. That moment made a lasting impression on him, sparking his imagination about the possibilities of space exploration. Carl was also deeply influenced by science fiction. He read magazines like Amazing Stories and novels by authors such as Edgar Rice Burroughs and H.G. Wells. These stories of interplanetary adventures and alien civilizations did more than entertain him. They inspired him to ask whether such things could be scientifically possible. Unlike many children who left such fascinations behind, Carl carried this curiosity into his adult life, blending scientific rigor with imaginative vision. But it wasn't just books and museums that shaped him. His parents played different but equally important roles in nurturing his curiosity. His father, though not formally educated, had a calm and logical approach that taught Carl patience. His mother, on the other hand, had big dreams and ambitions for her son, pushing him to achieve greatness. Carl later acknowledged that this combination of his father's grounding and his mother's drive gave him the balance he needed as both a scientist and communicator. As a child, Carl often asked questions that others found too big or too abstract. He wanted to know what stars were made of, how life began, and whether we were alone in the universe. These questions were not just passing interests. They became the foundation of his future career. By the time he was a teenager, it was clear that Carl Sagan was destined for the sciences. In high school, Carl excelled in subjects like mathematics and physics. teachers recognized his potential, but it was his insatiable curiosity that set him apart. Unlike many students who studied only for exams, Carl wanted to understand the deeper why behind everything. For him, learning was not about grades, it was about discovery. During this time, he also developed a deep love for the night sky. He often gazed at the stars from his Brooklyn neighborhood, wondering about the immensity of the universe. These moments of stargazing gave him both comfort and perspective. While other teenagers were focused on sports or social life, Carl was quietly dreaming of galaxies far away. Carl's childhood was not one of wealth or privilege, but it was filled with something far more important: encouragement and imagination. His family gave him the freedom to question and the courage to seek answers. His city gave him access to libraries, museums, and science fairs. And his own mind gave him the endless hunger to know more. By the time he graduated high school, Carl was ready to embark on a journey that would take him from the classrooms of Chicago to the laboratories of NASA, and eventually to the television screens of millions worldwide. But at the heart of it all, he remained the same curious boy who once looked up at the stars and asked, "What's out there?" 2.Q. Education, the path to the stars. In high school, Carl Sagan faced the question that all young dreamers must eventually answer: where do I go from here? For Carl, the answer was clear: he wanted to study the universe. With his strong academic record and insatiable curiosity, he enrolled at the University of Chicago in 1951, one of the few institutions at the time that welcomed interdisciplinary exploration. At Chicago, Sagan found an environment that was intellectually alive, buzzing with ideas from physics, chemistry, biology, and philosophy. The university's unique curriculum allowed him to study across different fields, something that fit perfectly with his wide-ranging interests. Instead of narrowing his focus too soon, Carl embraced the full spectrum of science. Undergraduate years. Carl's undergraduate studies were a time of intense discovery. He majored in physics, but he also immersed himself in astronomy, biology, and even psychology. This interdisciplinary approach would later define his career, as he often bridged different sciences to explore big questions. One of the first major influences in his academic journey was Gerard Cooper, a Dutch-American astronomer often regarded as the father of modern planetary science. Cooper recognized Sagan's sharp mind and curiosity, taking him under his wing. With Cooper's mentorship, Sagan began studying planets not just as points of light in the sky, but as worlds with geology, atmospheres, and potential for life. During this time, Carl also developed his lifelong fascination with the possibility of extraterrestrial life. He wasn't content with simply studying stars and planets. He wanted to know whether life might exist beyond Earth. This bold line of inquiry was considered speculative at the time, but Carl's willingness to ask big questions would become one of his trademarks. By 1954, Sagan completed his Bachelor of Arts in Physics, but he wasn't done. His hunger for knowledge drove him to continue at the University of Chicago for graduate studies. Graduate studies and doctoral research. For his graduate work, Sagan shifted his focus toward astronomy and astrophysics, while also drawing insights from biology and chemistry. He earned his master's degree in physics in 1956, followed by a PhD in astronomy and astrophysics in 1960. Carl's doctoral research was groundbreaking. His thesis focused on the physical conditions of planets, especially Venus. At the time, Venus was a mystery. Many scientists imagined it might be a lush, tropical paradise hidden beneath thick clouds. Carl, however, used physics and chemistry to argue otherwise. Through calculations and analysis, he demonstrated that Venus's dense atmosphere of carbon dioxide would create a runaway greenhouse effect, leading to extremely high surface temperatures. This idea was bold and controversial, but it was later confirmed by space missions. Today, Carl Sagan is remembered as one of the first scientists to correctly describe the hellish conditions on Venus. This research was more than just planetary science, it also carried profound warnings for Earth. By showing how carbon dioxide could drastically heat a planet, Sagan highlighted the dangers of unchecked greenhouse gas emissions on our own world. Decades later, his work on Venus would be cited in discussions about climate change on Earth. Early career moves. After completing his Ph.D., Carl embarked on a career that blended teaching, research, and exploration. In the early 1960s, he worked at the Smithsonian Astrophysical Observatory in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where he studied planetary atmospheres and helped analyze data from early space missions. But Carl was not content to stay in the ivory tower of academia. He wanted to be where the action was, where rockets were launching, where planets were being observed up close, and where humanity was taking its first steps into the cosmos. This drive led him to collaborate with NASA, where he played a crucial role in shaping our early understanding of the solar system. He worked on the Mariner missions to Venus, the Pioneer and Voyager missions to the outer planets, and the Viking missions to Mars. His scientific insights guided how instruments were designed and what questions these missions tried to answer. One of his most famous contributions came during the planning of the Pioneer 10 and 11 spacecrafts. Carl helped design the golden plaque with engraved messages intended for any extraterrestrial beings who might one day find the spacecraft drifting through interstellar space. These plaques depicted a man, a woman, and basic information about humanity and our location in the galaxy. Later, he would also play a key role in the creation of the Voyager Golden Record, a phonograph record carrying sounds and images of Earth. These projects reflected Carl's unique blend of science and imagination. While other scientists focused narrowly on data, Carl always asked the larger, human questions. What does this mean for our place in the universe? How can we share our story with the cosmos? Teaching and academic positions. Alongside his work with NASA, Carl pursued an academic career. He taught at Harvard University for a time, but his unconventional thinking and boldness sometimes clashed with the conservative culture of the institution. In 1968, he accepted a position at Cornell University, where he would remain for most of his career. At Cornell, Carl thrived. He became a professor of astronomy and space sciences, and later the director of the Laboratory for Planetary Studies. Unlike some professors who were distant from their students, Carl was known for his enthusiasm in the classroom. He spoke with passion, used vivid analogies, and encouraged students to think big. One of his students later recalled that Sagan's lectures were like miniature versions of Cosmos. He didn't just deliver facts, he painted pictures of distant worlds, explained science as a human adventure, and inspired students to see themselves as participants in the grand story of the universe. The emerging science communicator. By the late 1960s and early 1970s, Carl Sagan was becoming more than a respected scientist. He was emerging as a public communicator of science. He wrote research papers and academic books, but he also began publishing popular articles that translated complex ideas into language the general public could understand. Magazines, newspapers, and television shows began inviting him to speak. His warm smile, clear explanations, and poetic style made him stand out. Unlike many scientists who avoided the spotlight, Carl embraced it, believing that science belonged to everyone. This dual identity as a serious researcher and as a gifted communicator set the stage for his most famous works in the coming years. Carl Sagan's education and academic journey was more than just a collection of degrees and research papers. It was the foundation of his life's mission, to understand the cosmos and to share that understanding with the world. From the classrooms of Chicago to the lecture halls of Cornell, and from the labs of NASA to the television studios, Carl was always both a scientist and a storyteller. The young boy who once stood in wonder at the World's Fair had now become one of the leading voices in humanity's exploration of the universe. And yet, his journey was only just beginning. Thought Q. The scientist who looked beyond. By the mid-1960s and early 1970s, Carl Sagan was no longer just a bright student or a young professor. He was establishing himself as one of the most influential planetary scientists in the world. His career blossomed at the exact moment humanity began exploring the solar system with robotic spacecraft, and Sagan became one of the guiding voices of this new era of discovery. He combined rigorous science with bold imagination, always willing to ask big questions. To Carl, planets weren't distant specks of light, they were worlds waiting to be understood. His work spanned planetary atmospheres, climate, astrobiology, and the search for life beyond Earth. Let's explore his major contributions in detail. Understanding Venus, the greenhouse effect. One of Carl Sagan's earliest and most important contributions was his work on the atmosphere of Venus. For centuries, Venus had been called Earth's twin because of its similar size and distance from the Sun. Some even imagined it might be a paradise under its cloud cover. Sagan, however, proposed a radically different view. Based on his doctoral research, he argued that Venus's thick atmosphere of carbon dioxide would trap heat through a runaway greenhouse effect, making the planet's surface unimaginably hot. He predicted temperatures of hundreds of degrees Celsius hot enough to melt lead. When NASA's Mariner 2 spacecraft flew past Venus in 1962, it confirmed his predictions. The planet was not a tropical paradise, but a hellish furnace. This was a landmark moment in planetary science, proving that Sagan's methods and imagination could reveal the true nature of alien worlds. His findings also carried an urgent message for Earth. If Venus could be transformed into an inferno by greenhouse gases, what might unchecked carbon emissions do to our own planet? Long before climate change became a household phrase, Sagan was warning humanity about its dangers. Mars. The search for life. If Venus was a warning, Mars was a hope. For centuries, people had wondered whether Mars was home to life. Early telescopes revealed surface features that some mistook for canals, fueling speculation about alien civilizations. Carl Sagan approached Mars with both skepticism and curiosity. He didn't believe in Martian civilizations, but he did think the planet could harbor microbial life. He became heavily involved in NASA's Viking missions of the 1970s, which were the first spacecraft to land on the Martian surface and conduct experiments searching for signs of life. Though the Viking experiments did not find conclusive evidence of life, Sagan's enthusiasm helped keep the question alive. He often reminded people that even if Mars was barren today, it might once have had conditions suitable for life. His insistence on the importance of this search made him one of the founders of what we now call astrobiology. The outer planets, Jupiter, Saturn, and beyond. Sagan's work was not limited to the inner planets. He also played a crucial role in the exploration of the outer solar system. He contributed to the Pioneer 10 and 11 missions and the more famous Voyager 1 and 2 spacecrafts, which visited Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. One of his key predictions was about Jupiter's moon Europa. Sagan suggested that beneath its icy surface, Europa might hide a subsurface ocean. Today, decades later, this idea remains one of the most exciting prospects for finding extraterrestrial life in our solar system. NASA is now preparing missions to explore Europa in more detail, an idea seeded by Carl Sagan's imagination. The Golden Records, Messages to the Stars. Perhaps one of Sagan's most iconic contributions came not in a laboratory, but in a project that blended science, art, and philosophy, the Voyager Golden Record. Launched aboard the Voyager spacecrafts in 1977, the Golden Record was designed as a time capsule of Earth. It carried sounds and images representing humanity, the greetings of children, music from Bach to Chuck Berry, natural sounds like thunder and birdsong, and 116 photographs depicting life on Earth. Sagan chaired the committee that designed this record, and his influence is visible in its hopeful, inclusive vision. He believed that if extraterrestrial beings ever found it, they should know not just about our technology, but about our culture, diversity, and humanity. The Golden Record wasn't just science, it was Sagan's.